I'm sitting here in St. James Park, not very far from 12 Downing Street. That's Duck Island, where you see the pelicans over there in the water. And behind me in the distance is what's known as Churchill's War Room. This is one of the 5 museums right here, part of the Imperial War Rooms, where Churchill met with the War Cabinet. This is back during World War II, to come together and decide and come up with a strategy to know how to deal with Hitler, with the so-called axis of evil. And so this was a very important place. It was very secretive. It was underground. A lot of things, information was brought in. Many times Churchill made his war speeches from the bunker behind here. And so this is a very historic place, very important place, because if what they were strategizing had not worked out, the world would look very different. And that different was not going to be good. The different was the victory for Nazi Germany. And so the lesson for me is, in history there are times where people like Churchill, Winston Churchill, rise up and are used to stand up and to rally people, to inspire people, to inspire the world to stand up against evil and to fight, whatever the cost. And a lot of people gave their lives to fight back this very devious mindset of ruling the world or the superiority of one group of people.
If you've never seen the movie Darkest Hour, I would highly recommend it. It is set during World War II in May of 1940, when Winston Churchill became the new Prime Minister of Britain. Unlike his predecessor, Chamberlain, Churchill refused to negotiate with Hitler. And at the time, people were saying if he would only try for peace and if he would only try to negotiate, Hitler will change his mind and not do what he is doing. And Churchill knew better. He knew that Nazi Germany under Hitler was not interested in peace. In fact, they were already on a war path. And the United States began sending assistance in September of that year, 1940, but it would not be until December of 1941, after Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th, that we got involved. And when we got involved as a nation, that's when Churchill knew that Hitler would finally be stopped. This would be his defeat. In fact, he wrote, "He slept the sleep of the saved and thankful that night." He could finally sleep in peace, knowing that now America would be part of that war. In our series on Judges, we come to a very similar time when Israel was also in grave danger. It was not just one Hitler coming against them, but many. And it was so important for the tribes to come together in unity, but unfortunately, some did, but many went astray. In fact, that's the title of our message today, Stray, keeping our Western theme. Strays are those cows that sort of drift away and they're over there eating grass or whatever while the herd has gone on. Then someone has to go and bring them. Someone has to put their life on the line and go rescue them. Strays. Unfortunately, some of these tribes had become strays. The message today also applies to us in America today. I believe, I've been here 30 years, I've never seen our nation more divided than at this time in history. People are divided on so many levels. It is very scary. You have your Bibles with you. Go ahead and turn to the book of Judges, chapter 6, and verse 14. In a time like that, what is God's way? How does God work? God chooses a very unlikely person to deliver his people. In the face of incredible odds, God's way is the way of weakness. We think that if we're going to combat this enemy and we're going to stand against evil. We need something very powerful. God says, I'm going to use the weak. Churchill was not someone that you would have voted for if you were there back then. In fact, his own party were not sure about him. Now, today we say, what a great man, and we have his quotes in our speeches, and we have his busts and his statues all over the place. But back in those days, you would have said, not Churchill. He can't do that. And yet God chose someone like him to stop a very evil man and an evil ideology. He desires to use a person who is willing to admit his or her weakness so that God can pour his grace upon them. And those who are self-sufficient, those who are self-seeking, are like strays who refuse to listen. Judges chapter 6, verse 14. Then the Lord turned to him being Gideon, and said, Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? So Gideon said to God, O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. Gideon's response to God's call to go and save Israel is often preached and taught as if, look at this man, he is so weak. He is so cowardly. He is so faithless. God is telling him to go, and he's like, oh, I can't. I'm so sorry. And my clan is the weakest, and I'm the least. He is so faithless. What a man. It was anything but that. In fact, the truly weak and cowardly and faithless are found in Judges chapter 5. Gideon was actually doing exactly what he was supposed to do. What we want to do in understanding Gideon, we're going to go to Judges 5 for a few moments and look at those people, in fact, those tribes who were cowardly, who were faithless. And then let's look at Gideon and see the contrast and see the kind of person God uses to bring about a change. Judges chapter 5 is the song of Deborah. If you were here last weekend, after Sisera, this evil man, was defeated and killed, God used Deborah to write this song. And in this song, we read about this mixed response of the tribes of Israel. It's like a roll call. In the army, in the military, you have a roll call. God gives the roll call. Some tribes respond with yes. Others make excuses. So let's look at the roll call. Judges chapter 5, starting in verse 14. The roll call is Ephraim. If you look at the screen, Ephraim was right in the center of Israel in the promised land. It says, from Ephraim were those whose roots were in Amalek. What does that mean? You see, the people of Ephraim were surrounded by the Amalekites. The Amalekites were these people way to the south. They were this marauding tribe. They were known as the first of the nations, but they were also these people who attacked God's people as they were coming into the promised land. Remember, they attacked the stragglers in the back. They attacked the sick, the weak, the young, those who couldn't move fast. These were the Amalekites who came and killed them. If you remember when Moses went up to the mountain and held his hand high, and Joshua fought against these people, they were the Amalekites. Terrible people, ruthless people. And they were in charge of Ephraim. The Ephraimites could have made some excuses. They would have said, we would love to come and help, but we got our hands full. We have to fight these people. We would love to help. They showed up. Roll call, Benjamin. Judges 5:14. After you, Benjamin, with your peoples. If you look at the map again, Benjamin was a small tribe, one of the smallest tribes. They even had a smaller territory compared to the rest. They could have made an excuse and said, well, we can't. We just don't have the numbers in our county. We just don't have the numbers. No. When the call came, Benjamin responded. They showed up for the battle. Roll call. Manasseh. Judges 5:14. From Machir, rulers came down. Machir was another way of saying Manasseh because Machir was Manasseh's oldest son. This was the tribe on the east side of the Jordan River. If you notice that the two bodies of water, that's the Sea of Galilee to the north, the Dead Sea to the south. Over there, the big massive body of water is the Mediterranean Sea. Manasseh was on this. They could have made an excuse and saying, the Jordan, it's so hard to get through there. It's so muddy. Pastor Shah, we'd love to come, but the rains, it's just so much rain. I often want to say, what are you doing with the rain? Can't come to church because the rains are, you're like flooded. Talk about politics. There's just so much. I just don't even know where to begin. It's an excuse. The people of Manasseh, they showed up. Zebulun, Judges 5:14. And from Zebulun, those who bear the recruiter's staff. Recruiter's staff means somebody who was educated, the scribes. This is very interesting because Zebulun is not a big tribe. If you notice there, right up on top, they did not just send fighting men. They did not send people who were expendable. They sent educated people because on the battlefield, you need people who can read and write, who can think, who can take messages. They sent the best of the best from Zebulun. Roll call, Issachar. Judges 5:15. And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Princes mean they were not just ordinary soldiers, they were commanders. They showed up. If you notice up there, Issachar, not a big place, not a big tribe, but they were willing to fight. The list continues, but unfortunately, there is a shift. I want you to pay attention to the shift because the roll call keeps going. Reuben, Judges 5:15. Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great resolves of heart. You know what resolves of heart means? It means just like their ancestors, they made big promises. Pastor Shaw, that was a great message. I'm telling you, that was an education. What are you going to do about it? Absolutely nothing. People come here and they walk out and they do nothing. That's Reuben, by the way. That's the great-great-great-granddaddy of the tribe of Reuben. What are you going to do about that? Are you going to talk to people? Are you going to get people registered to vote? No, nothing. Just great message, though. What are the numbers, by the way, of evangelical voters who are actually registered to vote? What is the number now? What's the percentage? It will shock you. I guarantee there are people who are sitting right here who have yet to register to vote. They're truly honest. They haven't even registered. Great resolve. What are you going to do? Nothing. Now listen to Reuben. It goes on and says, it's verse 16. Why did you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the pipings for the flocks? Means they just sat around their campfires listening to the bleatings of the sheep, playing their music. And then it says here, the divisions of Reuben have great searchings of heart. I'm still thinking. How long are you going to think? At some point in time, you have to make up your mind, right is wrong, right, wrong is wrong, stand for biblical convictions. It's very simple how you should think. Everybody getting the message? There's a message, but there's also a message to us as a nation. Biblical values is what you should stand for. The discussion is very simple. The life of the unborn matters. It's very simple. The roll call continues. Gad, Judges 5:17. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. So go back to the map. Gilead is another way of saying Gad. The other tribe of Manasseh showed up, but Gad's like, oh, we just can't. It's just so much going on. That happens in church. That happens with our nation, where people are comfortable where they are. Oh, that's over there. That's their fight. Let someone else handle that. By the way, this tribe is going to get involved in just a few chapters because the Ammonites are going to bring the fight to them. Now it's like, please come help us. I've been preaching on these things for years, and often people are very dismissive. It's just a political year. It's just election year, so Pastor Shah has to do this. And now it's like, have you seen the price of groceries? I'm like, been saying that for a long time. Have you seen how weak we are in the world? I've been saying that a long time. Have you seen how the standard of living is collapsing? Yes, I've been saying that for a long time. You just found out? The roll call continues. Dan, Judges 5:17. Where is Dan? You see them sitting on the coast? It says, and why did Dan remain on ships? This tribe was so busy doing business with the Phoenicians back and forth. Their ships are coming and they're exporting and they're importing. Hey, we need your help. We need your help fighting over here. We need your help. Well, we just got too much going on. And they sat in their ships, which means this: if things get worse, we'll just set sail, go somewhere else. By the way, you do know in America today, this is, I'm a little biased, the best place on earth. I don't know what you believe. You say, if you go somewhere else, where are you going to go? That's what this tribe was doing in Dan. It keeps going. Roll call Asher in Judges 5:17. They are way to the north. They're also on the coast. Asher continued at the seashore and stayed by his inlets, which means this tribe didn't even have ships, but they were satisfied sitting on their beaches. Thank goodness others did fight, because it says here in Judges 5:18 about Naphtali. Zebulun, by the way, is a people who jeopardized their lives to the point of death. Naphtali also on the heights of the battle. If you look at the map again, Naphtali is way to the north. Asher said, we're not coming. We're busy fishing and we're busy in our recreation. Naphtali said, yeah, we're so far away, but we're going to show up. There's one more in Judges 5:23. It says, curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the mighty. This was not a tribe or a clan. This was just a town, a city that refused to help. And God put a curse on him. Now, this curse was so real and so powerful that to this day, archaeologists cannot find this place called Meroz. It's gone. I hope you're getting this message. These tribes were supposed to come together and fight against the enemies of God's people. But when the enemies came, half showed up and half were busy and made excuses. You know, in our nation, people talk about these United States. We've always been divided. As a people, we've been divided. This division did not begin yesterday, day before. We've been divided. But at times that it mattered, people came together. I want to give you a quick history lesson. Is that all right? Nobody's going to answer? Well, whether you answer or not, I'm going to do it anyways. And unfortunately, some of you have, whether it doesn't matter who you are, you have bought into revisionist history or woke history or just a superficial Christianized history. Sometimes even that sometimes doesn't work. 1989, David Fisher wrote a book called Albion's Seed. Great book, by the way. Great book. And in this book, he talks about the peoples that came to America. Now, we're not talking about the Spanish or the French or the Dutch, and these are outliers. I mean, but the main group of people that came to America were from England. The majority came from that part of the world, from England. But they were not all the same people that came here. In fact, if you look at the map here, these people that came to those early colonies came from different parts of England. So let's begin. You see the yellow over there on England's side, which is to the right. Those were people from East Anglia. Those are people who had Puritan roots. They were searching for religious freedom. They came to America. They're one of the first ones to come. And they came and they settled in New England, Boston, Massachusetts, that part of the world. The second group that came sort of simultaneously, but then really took on, were those who came from, you see the purple over there in England, that's to the south and the west of London. These are people who were Cavaliers. These are people who supported the crown. They fought for the king. Guess where they went? They went to Tidewater region, Virginia, North South Carolina. These were those people. Very different from the Puritans. Oh, they come from Christian background, but they don't have the same convictions like the Puritans. I like the Puritans, but they were weird. They were weird. You say, oh no, well, you haven't studied them. The Virginians did not like them much, and the New Englanders did not like the Virginians. They said, they're weird, they're this, they're that. And then a third group of people began to come here. They came from the Midlands. You see that blue over there in England. These are people kind of low income, hardly have anything, not like the Puritans, not like those Cavaliers. They are the Midlanders. They came here, of course, for freedom, but also for opportunity. And they settled in the Delaware Valley. If you see right there, New York, New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania. They came for their own purpose. And then the last group that came, you see them in the orange, red, whatever, and they're coming from the north of England. These are people who are coming from the border, the Scottish Highland border region. They came and they settled where? Where would you say they settled? The Appalachian. They came from the same part of the world, but very different in their mindset. For example, the New Englanders, liberty to them is ordered liberty. Very strict on faith and matters of faith and this and that. The ones who came in the purple, they're more hegemonic, means this is a status symbol, means this is who we are. Everybody has their status, but we're all free, but you serve us and we serve them, and this is how it works. The Delaware people, more reciprocal, means I have my liberty and you have your liberty. As long as we can work together, we all have liberty. The Appalachian people, they're just natural liberty. I'm born free. Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. I'm a very different mindset. It means I'm free. If you try to say otherwise, we'll kill you. Now, here's the most interesting part. The American idea should not work because these people didn't like each other. The New Englanders did not like the Virginia people. The Virginia people and New Englanders did not like the Delaware people. The Appalachian people were just leave us alone. Don't come up here. And guess what happened? When the mother country came against them, they united, which shocked England. How in the world are these people working together? You know how? It's the hand of God. It's the providence of God. When you actually get away from watching YouTube videos and actually get away from listening to socialist professors, you find out that they are talking constantly about providence, the miracle of God. How are we going to come together? It's a miracle of God. So we've been divided, And yet, in those crucial moments, by God's grace, we came together. The sad part today is that we are more divided today than ever before, but we're not calling on God. We're trying to come together, but without God, it's not going to work. And is any wonder that we're losing ground? Let's go back to Judges. Listen to what happens here. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years, and the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves the dens, the caves, the strongholds which are in the mountains. So it was whenever Israel had sown, Midianites who would come up, also Amalekites, and the people of the east would come up against them, and they would encamp against them, and what's the word? And destroy. Means these people came not to come just and rob or take the food or take the resources. They came and said, we're going to destroy this. Tell me it doesn't apply to America today. I want to ask people, what are you standing for? What are you fighting for? What policy do you want to see change? Or what is it that you feel like needs to change? They don't have an answer. We just want to destroy. In the past 4 years, you've seen more destruction than ever before. What is your goal? What is your platform? They don't know. The platform really is, we just want to destroy the American idea. That blows my mind because this country, this idea is so amazing to come and destroy. It doesn't make sense to me. And yet, what are the tribes doing in America? What are the people doing? Nothing. We're just sitting around watching, going about our lives, business as usual. It's just election year, and this is what Pastor Shaw does, or this is what so-and-so does, and this is just that. Listen to this. These nations came, they destroyed the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor donkey. Verse 5, for they would come up with their livestock and their tents, coming in as numerous as locusts. Both they and their camels were without number, and they would enter the land to destroy it. Numerous. How numerous? If you keep reading the book of Judges, as many as 135,000 people, and camels, as you can even count how many camels. Now, camels are very interesting creatures. If you know anything about camels, they're bred for the desert. And these Midianites, these Ishmaelites, specialized in breeding camels. And so they're bringing these animals who can go without water for several days in the desert. And now they're marching through beautiful pasture land, beautiful farmland, and destroying everything in sight. Camels may not drink for a couple of days, but when they do drink, in just one gulp, they will drink 30 to 50 gallons of water. If it's 135,000 people, I would say at least 60 to 90,000 camels. Can you imagine if each one drinks about 50 gallons? Entire wells empty. Entire streams empty. And camels eat. Of course, they eat grass. They eat vegetation, but they will eat thorny bushes. They will eat trash. Inside a camel's mouth is like this leather-like, skin. So it can keep eating and it doesn't damage its mouth. It will even eat the tent. That's why the Bedouins have to park their camels a little further away. Can you imagine bringing all these camels into the land? They are tearing it and leaving it devastated. What is your purpose? You want to steal? You want to take something? No, we just want to destroy. Listen to verse 6. So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. They called upon God. You know, the greatest need in our land today is to call upon God, to pray and say, God, we need your help. I find it funny when people talk about George Washington not being a Christian or being a deist and all that. Read his journals. He was constantly praying. Most of the founding fathers were men of prayer. And listen to what God did in verse 7, Judges 6, verse 7. It came to pass when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel. And the prophet, he reminded them, I brought you up from Egypt. I brought you out of the house of bondage. I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians. I've done all these things for you. Verse 10, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But where did they fail? But you have not obeyed my voice. Would you agree with me in America? We're not obeying the voice of God. Forget about the streets. In the church, we're not obeying the voice of God. God says, this is the truth. This is sin. This is holiness. And we say, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make our own truth. Is there any wonder we're in trouble? Did you know that before the Revolutionary War, the most dangerous places in America for the British were the churches? Did you know that the British soldiers would purposely destroy the churches because in the churches they would have pastors preaching to the people about the need to stand up and fight? And so they would destroy the churches, they would tear down the walls, and they would use the churches as stables. How are we using our churches today in America? We're not. How often do you think from the pulpit, even I am preaching to you right now, but somebody said, you could have been more direct. I was like, yes, we're working on that. But I hope you're getting the message. There's a message for our personal lives. There's a message for our church, but then there's also a message for our nation. You have not obeyed my voice. Now in verse 11, now the angel of the Lord came and he sat under the terebinth tree. Now, angel of the Lord was not just any angel like Gabriel or Michael. He was someone very special, and we're going to see his identity in a few moments. Who is he? As we read, he came and he greeted Gideon, mighty man of valor. The Lord is with you. Are you going to be the one who will fight? And of course, Gideon's response is, God, why is this happening to us? Verse 14, then the Lord turned to him. Isn't that interesting that this is the angel of the Lord, but in the very next verse, the Lord turned to him, which means this is none other than God. God came down. You say, who is this God? This is the second person of the Godhead. This is the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. We're going to see that later on in the messages coming up, where even the name of the angel of the Lord is the name given to Jesus. And what does this angel of the Lord, what does this pre-incarnate Jesus say to Gideon? Judges 6:15, so he said to him, O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh. I am the least in my father's house. The Lord said to him, surely I will be with you. Does anybody else in the Bible say that often? It's Jesus. As he was leaving, what did he say? Lo, I am with you even to the end of the age. And what is the name of Jesus? His name shall be called Emmanuel, which is God with us. You see, This is God with us. This is Jesus who came down as Israel is suffering, as everything is being destroyed, and they cry out to him. He comes down. And as Gideon admits his weakness, this is not cowardice. This is not faithlessness. What Gideon is doing is he is following the pattern of how God works with people. He looks for the weak people. As I mentioned to you in the opening, Churchill was not the favorite of the people. In fact, most people said, this guy is crazy. Why are we putting him? He is going to destroy us. He does not know. He's a warmonger. This is not the man for the job. To the contrary, Churchill was just the man for the job. You see, God uses the least likely people. He uses the weak people. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul says, God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. How is our nation going to change? How are things going to change? Of course, we have to cry out to God. We need Jesus Christ. And when he comes, he's not looking for the brightest and the best. He's looking for those who are weak, but they're willing to submit to him. And Paul goes on to say here, therefore, most gladly, I would rather boast in my infirmities. That's what Gideon did. He said, Lord, I'm the weakest in my house, least in my father's house. Paul says, therefore, most gladly, I would rather boast in my infirmities that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, then I am strong. You see, God's pattern hasn't changed, whether in America or our personal lives or even this church. We often have people ask, like, what is your secret to the success at Clearview? I'm like, there is no secret. God took a weak person and most unlikely person who was willing to admit his weakness, and he poured his grace upon him. That's God's way. What is going to turn our nation around is when people, men and women, boys and girls, who are willing to say, God, I don't have the answer. I'm not the one. But if you're willing to use me, I'm here. I'm willing to listen and obey. Now, here's something happens in closing. Gideon tells the angel of the Lord, Gideon tells Jesus, the pre-incarnate Son of God, he said, if I have found favor in your sight, can you give me a sign? Okay, I'll give you a sign. Let me bring something to you. And so he runs back in verse 19, Judges 6:19, and he prepares a young goat. Now, in those days, that was hard to get any food, but he gets a young goat, slaughters it, prepares it, but then he also gets unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. Ephah is as large as a vessel that can hold a person. That's a lot of flour. Imagine a massive tub, and he kneads that dough, and he prepares this bread, and he brings it to the angel of the Lord, brings it to Jesus. And he also gets broth in a pot. He brings it, and the angel of the Lord said to him in verse 20, take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. And he did so. What exactly is happening here? Is this some strange ritual? What's happening here, if you know Leviticus chapter 7 and Numbers chapter 15, this is the peace offering. What Gideon is doing is he's giving the peace offering to Jesus Christ. Then the angel of the Lord put out the end of the staff that was in his hand, and he touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fire rose out of the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread, and the angel of the Lord departed out of his sight. This was a symbol that the offering had been accepted. Gideon's response in verse 22, when he perceived that he was the angel of the Lord, Gideon said, Alas, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face, which means I'm going to die. I saw the face of God. And the answer comes back in verse 23. Then the Lord said to him, Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die. So Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, The Lord is Peace. How interesting that this is a call to battle, but the answer is, God is your peace. What is the answer for our world today? Remember the old song? Jesus is the answer for the world today. Jesus is the answer. We're talking about peace. We're talking about reconciliation. We're talking about bringing people together. Without Jesus Christ, you cannot do that. This is the pattern set 3,000 years ago. This was the pattern our nation followed. Do you know that even people like Benjamin Franklin and others, they knew that Thomas Jefferson, they knew that without God, without having God in the center, this republic cannot work. And purposely, they infused language that talks about God and being a nation under God and being a nation blessed by the providence of God. And what we're doing is, even people on our side, like, let's take God out, let's take all these convictions out, let's see if we can make this thing work. It'll be a clown show. And later generations will laugh at us and curse us and say, you did not know what made this nation work? You did not know the secret of our unity was Jesus Christ. I'm praying. I don't know who will listen. I'm an outsider, but I can see how this nation worked. You may have been born and raised here, but it's sad that many people do not know. The secret is Jesus Christ. You know what the Bible says? Paul says here in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 13, but now in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ, for he himself is our peace. Jesus is our peace, who has made both one. Of course, it's talking about the Jewish people and the Gentiles, but also as a nation. If we're going to come back together, we will need Jesus Christ to be the center. And if the church cannot give a message like this, who will? So I don't know where this message applies to you. Maybe it applies to your heart. Maybe it's for you. You think you got to be this, that, and the other. There are things you don't like about yourself, and you wish you were this, and you wish you had a different upbringing, or if you had a different life, a different job, a different home. God uses the weak things. And when he finds a weak person who's willing to submit to him, he pours his grace upon them. Maybe it's for our church. Maybe it's for churches all across the land. Just like in the time of the judges, speak out. Like that prophet, speak out. God has blessed you. God has given us so many things, and yet we're not listening to God. It's a word to us. Do you know, we often think that everybody in early America were all Christians. That's not true, by the way. They all came from a Christian background, but probably about 17% was all the number. And they prayed for a revival, and that number jumped from 17 to 34. They prayed for an awakening. What we need in America is an awakening. It's different now. There's so many different people from different backgrounds. You know what I'm finding? God works in amazing ways. Look who's got here. God is using people that will surprise you, who love this nation more than you realize, and who love Jesus Christ even more. He is doing something if you're open to let him work. Jesus is the one who brings us together, who breaks down the wall of separation. Our nation needs unity. Our nation needs an awakening. Our nation needs to understand what is really happening, the destructive forces. Or are we going to be like those tribes? Oh, I'm good. If I only had this in my life, I would be such a good Christian. That's what they were saying. If God would only answer this prayer for me and fix this problem and meet this need, oh yeah, I'm ready for Jesus. That's what they did. And if you've never given your heart to Jesus, that's where it begins.